Springfield on Sunday, October 1st. Can you even believe it? It's already October 1st. And we are going to continue our discussion regarding Soul Mastery by Toni Boehm. And I welcome you at home and those here. We've got a smaller crowd this morning. Everybody's they're either tired or they're enjoying this beautiful weather. So we will go ahead and get started. So remember, we're going through the book Soul Mastery by Toni Boehm. That's what it looks like. Here's what it looks like in person. Deceptively small book with big ideas. And so last week we did kind of like an overview and really talked about the overview of Soul Mastery and a few of these ideas. But this week we're going to dive into in her quadrilogy that forms Soul Mastery. This week we're going to talk about the energy, vibration, frequency, and the conscious neutrality. So just a reminder, what she considers soul mastery is a shift out of third-dimensional human ego survival dominated orientation and reality into a multi-dimensional, universal, and quantum-oriented existence. And so the first part of that is energy, frequency, and vibration. So if we look at that and break it down, just, we were just talking before the class about how things start lining up and quantum physics is real and all of those things. And so when you look at some of the quotes that she points out, and some of them we've seen before, but this is Nikola Tesla. And so this is just another person that wasn't necessarily, in the habit of spiritual teachings, but was in the habit of quantum physics and those types of things. And so Nikola Tesla says, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And that's also what we talk about in our spiritual realm here at Unity. So energy is the dynamic substance that underlies and interconnects all things. And energy is set into motion through vibration. And then you have vibration is the rate of motion, and that motion creates a momentum or movement of energy. And the vibrational momentum holds a speed. It can be slow, which she also refers to as dense, or high, which she refers to as light. And this vibrational momentum speed aligns with and emits a frequency. And then that frequency, whatever range that is in, determines the dimensional level at which the energy is vibrating. So that's how the energy, frequency, vibration all goes together. And I thought it was interesting for those, I know a couple of you were at Daniel's concert last night. And so at one point, as Daniel was doing his storytelling in between songs, he was talking about an opportunity he has to go into elementary school music classrooms and talk about things regarding music. And one of the things he talked about was how amazing it is that when you pluck a string on a guitar, what's actually happening is a vibration is going out into the air, and that vibration, it goes to your eardrum, and your eardrum interprets that vibration, or picks up that vibration, your brain interprets it and into a musical note, right? And like that all seemingly happens instantaneously. Like it's not like he plays the note and we all sit there and wait for it to hit our brain, right? Like we just hear it as he plays. And so I just thought that was really cool in thinking about talking about energy, frequency, and vibration. And that's what Toni talks about. She uses the example of like tuning a radio, but also just the music, like playing different notes. And that's what we talked about last week with the piano, that by changing the energy, frequency, and vibration, we can change the whole song. We can change the whole realm in which we are playing. And for the purposes of this book, she talks about that in changing the dimensional level at which you are perceiving this human reality. And so, Toni also tells a story in the book about when she was a young girl and she was with a friend and she was visiting the friend's grandmother, and they had to walk to get to this grandmother's house. And she said they had to walk through kind of a wooded area, and before they would get to the grandmother's house, well, that's interesting. I'm going to use my energy work. That's an interesting thing that's happening right now.
Try to reset the HDMI.
I wonder what that could mean. We'll ask boring questions.
Probably just needs
You can
reset.
get one off on that.
There you go.
Okay. I was going to say, it just made my computer go whoop. So, thank you, John. We'll see if we can get that to go away. Everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. I think we just had a moment.
Just to prove it.
We just had a moment right here, live. Okay, so she heard her friend on the way to this grandmother's house. They have to pass a wooded area, and before they get to the grandmother's house, there's a neighbor that they've known growing up, and this neighbor has a beautiful garden in her backyard, and had always loved to tend the garden. And so the girls, it was common for them to see her as they were growing up. And so she says that they're walking, and that this particular day, they started to pass the garden, and the neighbor was standing in the garden looking at her flowers, and she turned to them and smiled and waved, and they both waved back, and then she turned and walked into the wooded area. And she said it did strike them as odd because she had been very sick. And so they were like, oh, she must be well. She's back in her garden, but it was kind of weird that she walked into the woods. So they get to the grandmother's house, and the girls are talking and just telling them, they're like, oh, and we saw the neighbor, but she went in the woods. That was weird. And the grandmother says, stop talking nonsense. She passed away this morning. You did not see her. And Toni said she is 100% certain that they did see her transforming energy. She's like, we both saw it at the same time. We both waved back.
Oh.
And so that she believes that was one of her first experiences with understanding that there was some kind of energy that existed that maybe not everyone could see and interact with. And that she also thinks that her and her friend's ability to interact with that is because they were children. And this whole idea of the veils of forgetfulness, which she references as that third dimensional thinking, just getting bogged down in the, reality, where you're having that reality of separation and not having a full conscious awareness of how this energy is working through life. And so she says, we were kids, and so we didn't have that bogged down. So when we saw her standing there, we thought, well, of course she's standing there. We didn't have the thought, that's not possible, she's been sick, I'm seeing things, all of that. And so, anyway, I just thought that was a really cool story about interactions that we may have had as children, or that as we she talks a lot about as you start moving into that fourth dimensional and fifth dimensional thinking, that you may experience this world differently than you have before, because you're more open and receptive to the idea that there's been energies around you all along that you maybe weren't completely aware of. Yeah, John?
Yes, my daughter
had a quote-unquote imaginary friend, Elizabeth, when she was little, when she was 3-ish. And I look back and go, well, how imaginary was Elizabeth?
Mhm.
And
And I think it's possible, I don't know, who knows, maybe every imaginary friend is other energy. I think some, maybe yes, maybe no, it depends on the child and their creative, imaginative spark, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a similar story with my daughter. She had 3 imaginary friends. And one was Tammy, they were Tammy, Lana, and Kucha. And she would always say, oh, Tammy's here. Or they would be around. Another sort of side story, when she was about 3 years old, she said, I can't find my children or my husband. I have 8 children, I can't find them anywhere. So, maybe that's the previous life.
Right. Yeah, and so again, she talks about the veil of dense energy being that third dimensional thinking, and so I just pulled up the slide from last week, just a reminder that that's the reality of separation when you're in survival mode, that fear, anxiety, greed, unconscious of your true nature, all of that is kind of predominant in the thinking. And that when we start, like I said, when we start to release that or create new levels of thinking, open ourselves, she talks a lot in the book at one point that even if it's not like actually seeing energies, that maybe we become more sensitive to feeling energies as we become more aware to the idea that they're out there, and not only feeling them, but paying attention when we feel them. And so, that she talks about, that's that intuitive thinking, and that some people may reach that level of like clairvoyance and stuff like that they get so in tune to energy that they are feeling it and paying attention on that level. But that even if we don't reach that point, there's still that new sensation of being able to recognize that energy shifts are a way for higher level to be giving you clues and guidance. And so we talk about like that intuition of, when you walk into a situation and just every hair on your body stands up and it's just like a resounding, like an internal, I shouldn't be here, or this isn't meant for me, or whatever, and like really listening to that and, walking away. And I know I've had conversations with people that they're like, well, yeah, then maybe you're just scared and you're just walking away from everything. How do you know you actually, avoided something that could have been harmful? And it's like, well, I guess my view becomes whether I did or didn't, I listened to my internal guidance and that felt good and connected. And so I just have to believe that was steering me away from something that wasn't meant for me. The same that you could be steered towards, Sue has talked about things like when finding her house and things where she, was on a walk and took the same path every day. And for whatever reason, one of those days when she got to a Y in the path or a T in the path, she had always gone left, and for whatever reason on that day it was, you should go right, and so strongly that she was like, oh, okay, I've never gone that way before, but okay, and walks to the right and finds like the house that she's been writing visions for the last year. So it's not just that we're intuitive to energies that are showing us where we don't need to be, it's also showing us where we do need to be.
Wait.
Yes. John's bringing your microphone still.
I'll share a story with you that is totally unreal, but it's energy. I was living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the time, about maybe 5 blocks from my daughters. And I had bought this old home, 100 years old. Anyway, it had 2 scones on the wall, unconnected, no batteries, nothing. And my daughter's mother-in-law was dying of cancer, lung cancer. And on this day, this actually happened. I can't explain it. Those 2 scones lighted up. I was in the living room, and I just thought, oh my God. There was no plugs, there was no batteries, nothing. And as soon as this light came out of these 2 scones on the wall, my daughter called and said her mother-in-law had passed. I think she was leaving a message to me, you're going to be the grandmother now. Because there was only one grandchild at the time, and that was it. I mean, unexplainable, but it happened.
Yeah. Did you have something? Yeah. Yeah, and you know, she talks about even the little things like how often are you thinking of someone and then your phone rings and it's them? Or now in today's world, maybe you're thinking of them and then the text comes through that, you know, they're thinking about you at the same time. I know Lisa and I do that all the time where I'll be thinking and I'm like, oh, I need to see if she's messaged me, and I'll pick up my phone, and just as I bring it to my eyes, it starts ringing, and it's her, and it's like, it was something telling me like, oh, she's getting ready to call, like, pick up your phone. And all of those are energy. Those are, you know, things that we're connected to. And then she reminds us that, you know, we talked about it a little bit last week, and again, it's not anything, there's not so much in this book, I think, that is new. It's just how she puts it together as like a path, or kind of, not even a path, but because it's not linear, but the components of soul mastery, that if you can truly get to a level of mastery within these levels, then you are firmly in that higher level 4th dimensional thinking, or the 5th dimensional thinking, where that connection is more present throughout your day and throughout every interaction. And so we talked about last week the idea that you can create, you know, that these things create neural pathways, that the thoughts we have, and again, that's nothing new. I did like the way that she kind of broke it down and talked about like the scientific explanation and the spiritual explanation and how they match up. So she talks about, you know, neurons that fire together, wire together. And so consistent and habitual engagement of spiritual principles and higher level choices over time have the power to rewire neural pathways of the brain. And so this neurons that fire together, wire together is kind of the scientific way of saying thoughts held in mind produce after their kind, right? So as we strengthen those neural pathways, you know, it's like having a paved road versus a gravel road. And so if the bumpy gravel road is kind of hard to get down, but we've got this nice paved road that goes directly to another part of our brain, then our brain is much more likely to go, oh yeah, this is the path we travel most often. Yeah, John.
Also, the quantum theory idea that if you're aware of and observing something that's energetic, that then it can then transform into the material.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think that's also a part of what's going on.
Yes.
In that neurons fire together, wire together. When you're in sync, when you're aware, when you're noticing, then things materialize.
Yeah,
Just in front of you.
absolutely. And so that's what she says, when we become aware that everything is energy, frequency, and vibration, we begin to perceive things differently. Because by using those neural pathways that are in that perception mode, then we start to perceive everything around us. And so she says, you know, the scientific explanation for this perspective change is that instead of using neural pathways that are going to the amygdala's fight or flight response and being filtered through that part of the brain.
The sympathetic.
Yes, I've lost my word there. Then we begin to route things through pathways that seek a response from the executive centers of our brain, the frontal lobe, and so that's like higher level thinking within our brain, right? So the amygdala's fight or flight is survival. Is this going to kill me? Yes or no? What does my response need to be? That's that survival, third dimensional, like if we're stuck there. And if you've done research on trauma response, like that's what happens to the brain when it's experienced trauma, is like pathways get built to the amygdala, and things aren't going into our frontal lobe where higher level decision making and processing occurs, and that's very rudimentary. I look at John because I know John understands all of the brain
EMDR
works.
does
So
that.
that's very rudimentary, John. And I know that it is. For all intents and purposes today, that gives us the basis. And then the spiritual explanation is that by choosing the higher level thinking path, we're reducing or eliminating resistance and opening the doors to higher wisdom or divine guidance, which then begins to create a transformation of our being, because we are experiencing this human reality through that lens and allowing the connection and the flow of the higher wisdom to come through for us. She talks about one of the, and it's kind of what John was alluding to. So again, that one of the most powerful tools in helping us build those different neural pathways is beginning to step back and ask different questions and become more of an observer. And so this quote by Albert Einstein I love, and Mary Morrissey uses it in her materials as well. And so what Einstein said was, if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on the solution, I would spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask. For once I know the proper question, I can solve the problem in less than 5 minutes. And so she talks about, you know, when we're viewing things from that energetic, vibrational, and frequency perspective, we start to ask questions that are in alignment with that understanding. And Toni calls these empowering questions. And so she says we start when you're becoming that observer of self and asking empowering questions. Questions like, who did what, who's at fault or blame, or why is this happening to me, start to fall away. Because those are not questions that have a basis in energy, frequency, vibration. And so she says that we start to acknowledge our experience as an energetic being, interacting with the energy around us. And this also helps with our sense of non-attachment or non-resistance to the questions. And so some of her examples of empowering questions are things like, this is interesting. What might be happening energetically right now? Or, what meaning am I giving to this moment or this emotion or this interaction? What interesting dynamic is trying to arise right now? What might have, and she said, like when you're thinking about changing and transforming and sitting into those visions, things like, what might a person who is centered be feeling or thinking right now? And that's kind of the first step in, you know, sometimes it's easier for us to begin by looking outside a little bit and say, I know a person who always seems to be centered. What do I think they're thinking? What do I think they're feeling? And then you start to pull that into, how would it feel for me to feel that way in this moment instead of how I'm feeling? And she says, like, those questions, they just take us to a different part of the brain, a different part of the experience, and allow us to not suppress the emotion, but recognize that it's there, and then think about how is that connected to the energy, frequency, and vibration that's happening around us, or the energy, vibration, and frequency that we desire. And she reminds us again, you know, that there's no right or wrong. So the reality, she says, the reality you choose to live from is simply where you reside until you don't. And so it's all okay, right? All is well. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And so, you know, she talks about that the work involved in creating mastery of consciousness over the third dimensional elements isn't about focusing on how to solve the problems of your life. It's about learning to shift the energy, frequency, and vibration from which you are participating with life. Yeah, helping.
I've been watching a guru, and basically he says to shift your energy, allow yourself, any situation that's negative, you say one sentence, but then you have to counter it with 5 that are positive. And he said that very often when something is negative, we have a strong emotion. And so that emotion will control our subconscious. So he said, so when you do the 5 positive, you look at it and create emotion that's positive. And so you're creating more positive emotion, and that will shift your consciousness. The other thing that he says is gratitude is magical. And if you find yourself feeling negative, if you can catch yourself enough to think of something that you're grateful for, that disharmony and gratefulness cannot reside in the same mind. And so that's one of the ways to shift it. And it's just constantly, it's becoming aware enough to think of those positive things and to build that energy. And that will shift your whole, and that will begin to drive you and pull you in that direction.
Yeah, and so Toni talks about that at one point. It's that whole idea we cannot serve 2 masters, right? So you can't be thinking both of those thoughts and be in harmony with life and the experience.
The other reason to repeat the positive 5 times is because the subconscious thing that was the emotional is a rut. It's a habit. So you've been saying it a lot of times, so that's why you have to kind of like, okay, I need to intentionally put the shift in and put the new thoughts that I think are.
Yeah, that's a good visual. You guys know I like visuals. So I'm thinking about like the rut, and you're like building the little bridge over it. You're putting a board down so that you don't fall in the rut anymore. You go across it. Yeah.
You're creating a new exit off your freeway.
There you go, creating a new exit off your freeway. I like that one too. And so the power of these creating these new neural pathways, it just came to me. So a recent example in my life where I had a moment where I was like, oh, like my brain did something different than it would have done in the past. So Lisa, her truck, she was driving and there was this noise. She had fixed something in the front wheel well a couple times, and anyway, there was this noise again. She calls the mechanic and says, hey, it's making this noise now. And he's like, oh, get here immediately. I think what's going on, it could lock up your whole wheel, and then it's going to be a lot more expensive, and you're going to have it towed here. So she drives it to the shop, and consequently is right before we were leaving for vacation. And so that was the first difference in my thinking, was we're getting ready to head out on vacation. And instead of thinking, oh my gosh, here we go, we're on vacation, now the truck's in the shop, because that's where my brain would have gone years ago. Like I would have been stuck in that lack, like, oh no, now we're gonna have to pay to get this truck fixed, and how much is that gonna cost? And then we didn't have that in the vacation budget.
Yeah.
But I would have been spiraling out of control. But my thought was, oh, well, that's kind of convenient that it's going to be in the shop while we're gone because we only need one vehicle, the one we're taking on vacation. So that was thought number one. Well, then what happened is the shop calls her when they actually started to work on it. And when they put it on the lift and lifted it up, the cab of her truck and the bed of her truck went
Whoa.
because the frame had rusted. And so the pressure, as they raised it up, it got it in just enough of a bind or whatever that rust broke loose, and the cab and the bed of the truck separated. And so when she tells me this, my first thought was, thank you, God, that did not happen while she was driving down the highway.
Right.
And then my second thought was, oh, that was a different thought that I would have had. That thought of gratitude that happened first. And then, of course, there was a few thoughts of like, oh, okay, now we're down to one vehicle, and we're going to have to think through that. But there was never that, like, spiral panic, because I was so much in gratitude for the fact that all of those things conspired to have the truck have that problem while it was in the mechanic's shop, and not with one of my most beloved energies of my life, driving down a highway, potentially getting harmed or harming other people in the process of an accident. And so those are the kinds of shifts that, seem small, but that could have, in the past, like I said, I would have been in a spiral of lack thinking and frustration and upset and worry, and I would have my brain would have just feasted on that for weeks probably. And so it was a much different feeling to just kind of like, whew, breathe and sit back. And like I said, and having that experience of the first thought was gratitude. And that felt like growth to me. It was kind of exciting in that moment. And so those are the types of energy shifts that, like I said, in the grand scheme of the world, was that an earth-shattering shift? For me, it felt pretty big, and maybe it impacted some other energies around me, but it's not like I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't put the collective consciousness 10 steps ahead or anything, but it felt really big to me. Yeah.
Well, it's the crucial piece of the art of allowing.
Yeah. And so, and again, I don't get there in every moment, but I got there in that moment, and that was different than something I had done before. So that's like the transformation, that's the shift of being, where it made me realize, like, now that pathway is it exists in my brain. So hopefully other situations will get there as well. So then she goes into talking about conscious neutrality. And so conscious neutrality is a natural fourth dimensional state of being that by its very nature invites a more highly developed natural, spiritual, and emotional response to situations, people, and perceived discomfort. And so this is the higher state where we're consciously making choices that dismantle old and outdated perceptions, beliefs, and feelings. So this is, her term. I was joking with Lisa last night. My week was, there was a lot going on, work-wise, personal-wise, here at church. There was just a lot of things going on. And so I didn't stay ahead of the game as much as I would have liked. And I, was very set that I was going to come and see Daniel Nahmad sing in person last night because I love being here when he is live singing. And so that meant that I was like working on this PowerPoint after the concert when I got home.
Yeah.
And things were just kind of going, and so I was joking with Lisa. I was like, well, I'm gonna go finish this PowerPoint on conscious neutrality, and I am not feeling like I am in a place of conscious neutrality right now. So I need to go breathe for a minute and figure this out. And that's, again, if we're firmly in this fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional place, then there would not be moments where you get completely outside of that that feeling. But as I'm still learning and still on my path, there are absolutely moments where my humanness gets me, and but again, the difference being, I was the observer of self in that moment, recognizing like, okay, I'm not coming from this place right now. And again, 10, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have known to say, I'm not sitting in a place of conscious neutrality right now. I'm not connected to my higher level thinking in this now moment. I would have just thought, I feel out of control and everything feels crazy and I feel overwhelmed. And I wouldn't have had any kind of spiritual framework to put it to, or the understanding that I have the power to change it. I have the power to stop and step back and observe and do something different. And so that's all part of the path as well.
You're just a messy human.
Yeah, Elby says I'm a
it.
messy human. Yes, we're all messy humans, right? Until we're not. And then, and that's what we're talking about here. So she says that, you know, when she thinks about conscious neutrality, she thinks it's helpful to say what it's not. And so she says it's not pretending to be at peace while simmering near the boiling point internally. It's not a contrived state where you give off the appearance of calm, but you're like the iceberg where under the water nothing is calm. Or that you are putting on the mask of calm just to get you through a situation, that kind of thing. It's not pretending that all is well to avoid all the conflict that might be around you in your life. It's not a state devoid of emotion where nothing is expressed or spoken. And it's not about fixing problems or issues at the level at which they occurred. Right? So she says that's what it's not. So then what does she say it is? She says it is the ability and capacity to hold any emotion in a neutral, consciously mindful, elevated state while offering and inviting higher self, spirit, or source energy to constructively express through the emotion. Did everybody get that? Sometimes her definition, I'm like, oh, that's a lot of words. She likes a lot of description. But that's what, she's saying you're in a state of neutrality, but you're not devoid of emotion. So her little phrase there is, you care, but you do not carry. So it's not that you become an unemotional robot. That's not conscious neutrality. It's that idea of knowing that as a human experiencing this reality, emotions will happen, but we're looking at them from a more consciously mindful state of being and saying that emotion doesn't rule my experience. It's just a part of it, and what is it trying to tell me? That's an interesting thing. Yeah, Jerry.
Yeah, they in AA they teach that acceptance is the key to all of my problems. Until I can recognize the problem and then accept it, I can't even know what I can change. And then when I change, it's probably just me doing it. It's nothing else around me.
Yeah. And so it makes me think too, Wendy Fredrickson got up and talked a couple weeks ago with Sue, and she was talking about playing with energy. And then like once you recognize that you have the ability and the power to change ways of thinking, and by changing those ways of thinking and changing the perception, manifest things into your existence, your reality, that she's talked about this before, that she almost sees it like it's like the game, right? And there's even books like The Game of Life and How to Play It and those kind of things.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Because once you understand that you are that co-creator, or you have the ability to be the observer and go, wouldn't it be interesting if this could happen? And then start sitting into, if I think that it can happen, then it's already happened. It's happened in this now moment. And then we're just waiting for it to arrive. And if you ever hear Wendy talk, like she's got so many cool experiences about thinking about things, and then just them showing up in her reality.
Oh,
One of her stories, I remember, I think she talked about it in front of Sue, but I heard her say it before, like, she had been thinking, like, wouldn't it be cool for us to have rocking chairs to sit on the porch? And she was really, like, thinking about, that would feel amazing, sit in these rocking chairs. And then, like, the next day, or that day even, driving down the road, and someone had set out two perfectly good rocking chairs that they just didn't want anymore, had set them out for free, and she was able to pick them up and take them home and have her rocking chairs like like that. And like I said, she's got so many cool stories about things like that, and when those happen, that her response is like, oh, that was fun. That was fun to see how I could change that energy and pull things towards me.
Functionally, this ability and capacity to hold any emotion in a neutral, consciously minded, elevated state requires non-judgmental stance. That's what often the habit of having an opinion that whatever it is that you're paying attention to is good or bad or right or wrong takes out that neutrality and sabotages our capacity.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's funny, that's on the next slide probably, what you just said. The other thing at the bottom here, hold an established consciousness of abundance, and so creates the energetic space for the greater good of all, not just self. And so I thought that was an important piece of this idea of conscious neutrality too, is that in that space, in that level of thinking, that consciousness of abundance just is, and therefore is constantly creating that space. And John, you talking about the non-judgment, that's definitely, so it's what, conscious neutrality supports, an increased capacity to not judge by appearance, not judge through the lens of past perceptions, beliefs, or emotions. And it made me think, I have situations at work where people are very emotional about the situation that they're going through. And so it's always interesting to me, when I'm in a better place of seeing through this lens or feeling pretty centered, people can have these big emotional responses. And I find myself asking the question, instead of being like, oh, why are they yelling at me? And that's not right. I didn't do anything, and they shouldn't be yelling at me. It comes out more as, okay, they're feeling some really big emotions right now. What do I think? What might be behind that emotion? What is the need that they're trying to express to me right now that I could help with, that I could contribute to a shift for them? And when you start approaching people from that point, and that's what she's talking, she has a section in here about conflict, that is part of it, is that a person who is sitting in this conscious neutrality, who's doing this work and at higher levels, even when conflict comes up, it doesn't have to be negative. It's just a vehicle for a shift or a change in energy, because the perception of why that conflict is there is different. And so I think about that. Again, not always perfect at it, don't always do it every time, but I know when I do, there's big shifts that happen, and that it does have the power to impact others. I'm thinking of a particular situation where we had a grandparent who, the core of it was, she loves her grandchild. She was scared for her grandchild. She was confused about some processes, and was feeling unheard. And her response to that was to be really loud and throw a lot of blame at a lot of people, and keep calling. And when one person didn't give an answer that was acceptable, call another person and another person. So there was kind of, in the office, there was like, oh my gosh, she's calling everyone. And I listened to her and came from this place of asking different questions. And then our conversation went far differently. And then as people came, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you had to talk to her too. And I was like, she just loves her grandchild. She's worried, she's scared. And they're like, oh, I guess. But then what I've seen now is like some of those individuals who were just really upset that she had been cross with them, or maybe had raised her voice, or had thrown a little blame their way. I have heard other conversations now where they're like, well, I'm just trying to figure out where this is coming from. And I'm just trying, I want to figure out how I can help. And so like, those are the kinds of things that we have the power to show up as that, and then plant the seeds for maybe neural pathways to be changed and energy to be changed in those around us. Not that that's ever our goal, to change other people, but that's how we change the collective consciousness. Like, that's our part in raising that higher dimensional awareness throughout the collective. Yeah, John?
So, what I was trained to do in DBT was, when somebody's upset, is you validate what they're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we turn it on ourselves, we self-validate. So, that previous slide that says all the things that it was not,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, fronting that there's no emotion going on underneath. But when you are experiencing those things underneath, that when you self-validate and go ahead and allow yourself to have some understanding, some non-judgmental awareness, oh, that's why I'm experiencing this. And when we have that self-understanding and validation of, you're not just stupid, weak, whatever, blah, 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 but it's very understanding about why it is. It just takes the air out of it.
Absolutely.
Brings me back to acceptance is the key to all of my problems.
Yeah. Yeah, and so to kind of bring this conversation about conscious neutrality to a close today, so she says, the development of conscious neutrality initiates a progressive demonstration of conscious soul growth, spiritual principle, spiritual and emotional maturity, and movement into being a master facilitator of energy. And the things that we see from that, we increase our capacity for staying in the present moment. We observe a feeling rising, we can acknowledge the presence of the feeling and make a conscious choice to express it in a way that's constructive and keeps our energetic space open. And so she says that, when we're seeing mastery in this realm, it's reflected by the consistent and practical application of spiritual principles, consciously making choices to live from elevated emotional responses, the development of higher level values and qualities, inspired action, conscious application of all these in everyday interactions and decision-making processes. And I don't know if we said it last week, but so when she talks about like mastery, that is where more often than not, or the majority of the time, we are sitting in that higher fourth dimensional and up into that fifth dimensional space, so that we have worked through all of those third dimensional things, and we don't get pulled back down into those feelings. And recognizing again that that's it's a progressive path. It's a spiral of spiritual growth, and she's like, again, you can have an instantaneous experience where you're just like, oh, boom, I've released that, and like it is possible. But for most of us, it's a learning and relearning and a moving up and down and kind of playing with that energy until we gain a mastery of, okay, I understand how this works. I know how to shift my thinking and my energy to create the reality that I want. And so that's what she's talking about, like mastery, that soul mastery for her is when we are in that space where we are fully conscious of what all of this, how all of this is working, and we are sitting in that space, at least the majority of the time. And so she goes back to this, Ernest Holmes quote, "One who is in unity with the spirit is majestic in his power." And she relates that to is conscious neutrality in action, like one who is in unity with the spirit, who is in the midst of the storm despite the raging of men in the chaos of material thinking, can enter the silence and declare the absoluteness of his own being. And so that's what we kind of talked about last week, of like when you can be in the eye of the storm, right? And it's all swirling around you, and still sitting in that, knowing that peaceful, knowing that I am a spiritual being having this human experience, and all is well even in the midst of all that chaos, which is not an easy place to get to for most of us. But that's the whole journey of soul mastery. So again, I don't know that there's like hugely new concepts in here, but I always think it's beneficial to look at things from a different, Toni has a little bit of a different spin on things, and it's good reminders, and like maybe I love the conversation that we've had. Next week, we'll be talking about soul evolution and mastering abundance, and her thoughts on how that all goes together with soul mastery. All right, got some announcements. And thank you, Karen, for fanning yourself, because it is so hot in here, and I was like, it must just be me. I'm like,
things thinking, turn that on.
I know. Like, Karen just validated that my body is feeling very warm. Elby?
That reminds me of Rudyard Kipling's poem, If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, and then it goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's that same feeling, same concept.
Yeah. And those, I would like to think, like, there have been moments where I have been in that space, and boy, does it feel great to have the conscious awareness that, wow, like this is a different feeling. This is a different place to be sitting from, and in that same moment, not only does it feel good and all of that, but it just is truth, right? Like that when you're in the midst of all of that and feeling that peace, and there's just no other explanation other than that is a true connection in that moment, and that is truth, and it just resonates.
I also like yesterday, or last night, when Daniel was talking in between songs, and one of the things that he was talking about was that, we are humans, so we're always returning to the third dimensional non-unity of spirit consciousness. I mean, it's the nature of our being in this, so it's not that we don't have access to it, but we're always going to return, and then we have to remind ourselves.
Yes.
Go, oh, wait a second, oh, I don't have to do that. Oh.
Yeah, he had a song, it may be on his new album, the Why Do I Learn and Then Forget, and then I learn and then forget. Like, I thought I was past this, I thought I had already figured it out.
Right.
Nope, I learn and then I forget. And so,
Right.
it is exactly that, yes. Alright, so our announcements. The monthly drum circle is this Thursday at 6:30. Bring your drum and join in. If you don't have a drum, you can still come because the church has several drums that are here for people to use. Next Sunday, we will do part 3 of Soul Mastery with Toni Boehm. Spirit groups are beginning
The week of October 8th.
Okay, the week of October 8th. We are doing The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. It's a fabulous book if you haven't ever read it.
Yep.
Right now there's 3 facilitators that are willing to host a group. We are looking for a couple more. If you'd like to facilitate, please meet with John Brocker, or there's a sign up out in the foyer. If you would like to order a book, if you want the church to order it, you can prepay and sign the list. The cost would be $11, and they will be ordered on Wednesday, October 4th to be here in time for the class, but you of course can order your own book on Amazon or wherever you buy books as well. On October 11th at 6 p.m., we're having a volunteer training for those who would like to be involved in the shelter initiative. Please attend the training session, get all the details. Even if you're just curious, come and get more details. I know Lisa was just working on, they've got a whole new sign-up system that is apparently much user-friendly than the electronic sign-up system from last year, and so she's really excited about that. Calling all artists, crafters, and creators. You're invited to display your creations at the Artist Showcase on October 14th from 1 to 4. Interest forms are in the foyer, so you can fill one out to reserve your spot. And I'm told we already have like more than a dozen people who are going to come show us really cool stuff that they like to make. So I would encourage everyone, even if you don't make stuff, come see the stuff that other people like to create. Today begins week 5 of our 8 items in 8 weeks. 8 items in 8 weeks for our shelter. This week is chewy granola bars or cereal bars. Remember, if you bring in all 8 items by October 29th, you're entered into a drawing for $100. On October 20th, we're going to have our annual spaghetti sauce cook-off and variety show. It's a little rebranding of the talent show, or it's a variety show. We're calling for individuals who would like to do a 3 to 5 minute presentation of whatever talent they may have. And you can sign up if you'd like to participate in the foyer. Bobby Delmar and John Russ are co-hosting that event, so you can also talk with them. New member orientation will be October 22nd, right after service, and the new member ceremony will be October 29th during our celebration service. If you would like to become a member, please ask for an application in the office. The yard sale is coming up today after the service. We will be breaking down all the chairs in the sanctuary and bringing all of the items in from the pod. And then all week long, people will be here sorting and organizing. They could use help, or if you want to drop by snacks and food for those who are giving their energy to do that this week. And then the sale will be on Friday and Saturday. And remember, if you volunteer for the yard sale, you have first dibs on anything you see that you might like to have here.
We can still bring items, right?
Yes, you can bring items. I think they're asking for the cutoff like Thursday. Don't be trying to bring in items on Friday and Saturday while they're trying to sell items. But yes, since we have gone to a system of not pricing individual items, we can accept items much later in the week than we could previously, because it doesn't require people to be here until 2 a.m. putting price stickers on things, which has been fantastic. All right, thank you. We are complete this morning.
So are new members gonna dress?